What if I told you that in 1970, Ferrari and Pininfarina built a car so futuristic, so outrageous, that even today it looks like it rolled out of a science fiction movie? A car with no doors, a roof that slides forward, wheels half hidden under its body, and a monstrous V12 engine capable of over 550 horsepower. This isn't just any Ferrari. This is the Ferrari 512 S Modulo, a one-off concept that became one of the boldest statements in automotive history. When we talk about the Ferrari 512 S Modulo, we're not just talking about another prototype. We're talking about a turning point in the history of automotive design. A car that didn't just ask what's next, but dared to answer it with something so radical it shocked even Ferrari itself. To understand the Modulo, you have to go back to the late 1960s. Ferrari was at war on the racetrack. The 512S was Ferrari's weapon of choice, built to challenge the mighty Porsche 917 in endurance racing. With a 5.0-liter V12 and brutal performance, it was a machine forged for competition. And as part of the homologation process, Ferrari built 25 chassis. Most went racing, but one of them became something else entirely. That chassis landed in the hands of Pininfarina, Ferrari's longtime design partner. Inside the design house, a young visionary named Paolo Martin was sketching shapes the world had never seen. While by day he was working on conservative projects like the Rolls-Royce Camargue, by night he unleashed his imagination, experimenting with pure geometry, extreme wedge profiles, and futuristic aesthetics that looked more like space cars than sports cars. When Martin first showed his idea to Sergio Pininfarina, the reaction was hesitation. The design was too extreme, too alien, and far removed from Ferrari's traditional flowing curves. But Martin insisted. He believed the future of automotive design wasn't in curves, but in wedges, sharp, clean, aerodynamic, and futuristic. He wanted to prove that a car could be both sculpture and machine, both artwork and engineering. So, from a bare 512S racing chassis, the Modulo began to take shape. And every element was designed to shock. The car sat impossibly low, just 37 inches tall, lower than most race cars. Instead of doors, the entire canopy slid forward to reveal the cockpit, like climbing into a fighter jet. The front wheels were covered, giving the car a seamless, almost levitating look. And at the rear, the Modulo carried 24 round openings cut into the body, letting onlookers peer directly into the Ferrari's V12's beating heart. But these wild design choices came with enormous challenges. The canopy system wasn't just for drama, it was the only way to enter a car that low. Engineers had to create a mechanism sturdy enough to move the entire glass and roof section smoothly. Covering the wheels looked futuristic, but its severely limited steering angle, meaning the Modulo could barely maneuver in tight spaces. And cooling a 5.0-liter V12 under that futuristic shell? That's why those 24 vents became more than design flair. They were a lifeline for the engine. Most concept cars are built on mock chassis, without real powertrains, but the Modulo was different. Its DNA came directly from Ferrari's racing program. Underneath that wedge body was the soul of a Le Mans prototype. That gave it authenticity, credibility, and a mystique that separated it from other dream cars of the era. So, what did Pininfarina want with this car? The answer is simple: attention. In 1970, every major design house wanted to outdo the others in radical concepts. Bertone had shocked the world with the Lancia Stratos Zero, another wedge-shaped spaceship. Giorgetto Giugiaro was experimenting with sharp lines that would later define the 70s and 80s. Pininfarina couldn't just show another curvy sports car. They needed something outrageous, something people would never forget. The Modulo wasn't built for customers. It wasn't built for dealers. It wasn't even built for the road. It was built for the stage, the Geneva Motor Show of 1970. It was designed to pull crowds away from every other stand, to make headlines, to cement Pininfarina as the boldest design house of them all. And it worked. The Modulo was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was a Ferrari stripped of tradition, stripped of compromise, and transformed into pure imagination. A car that asked, what if Ferrari wasn't just about racing, but about the future itself? This was the vision behind the Modulo, a car that broke the rules of what a Ferrari could look like, what a car could look like, and challenged the world to think differently about design. It wasn't just a machine, it was a manifesto. Now, let's move from the vision to the machine itself. Because while the Ferrari Modulo looked like a spaceship, underneath it carried the beating heart of a true Ferrari prototype racer. And that's what makes this car so fascinating. It wasn't just style, it had the soul of competition. At its core, the Modulo was built on the chassis of the Ferrari 512S, the car Ferrari created to go head-to-head with Porsche's legendary 917 in endurance racing. And with that came one of the most ferocious engines Ferrari ever produced, a 5.0-liter naturally aspirated V12. This wasn't some showpiece motor. It was a thoroughbred racing engine designed to survive the brutal punishment of 24 hours of Le Mans. The numbers are staggering, especially when you remember this was 1970. The V12 pumped out around 550 horsepower at 8,500 RPM, a screaming redline symphony. Torque figures were less publicized because Ferrari back then didn't brag about torque, they bragged about revs, speed, and horsepower. Power went to the rear wheels through a 5-speed manual gearbox, as raw and mechanical as you could imagine. And then there's the weight, just about 900 kilograms, or under 2,000 pounds. That combination, 550 horsepower and such a low curb weight, gave the Modulo a power-to-weight ratio that rivaled pure racing cars of its time. Ferrari claimed it could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 3.0 seconds. Let that sink in. 3 seconds? In 1970. That's faster than most modern supercars built 50 years later.
And top speed? Theoretical figures reached as high as 220 miles per hour or 360 kilometers per hour. Whether it could actually achieve that in practice is debatable, given its aerodynamics and setup, but the claim alone shows how radical this machine was. This was Ferrari flexing its muscles. Yes, it looks like art, but it's still faster than anything you've ever seen. Let's talk about dimensions, because they mattered here. The Modulo stretched about 4.48 meters long and 2.04 meters wide, yet it stood just 0.935 meters tall, barely up to your hip. Think about that. You'd have to crouch to look inside. It sat lower than some modern racing prototypes. That low profile wasn't just for looks. It was part of Paulo Martin's obsession with aerodynamics, cutting through the air with as little resistance as possible. But raw numbers don't tell the whole story. The Modulo wasn't just about performance. It was about the way performance was packaged, and that's where the public reaction comes in. When the Modulo debuted at the 1970 Geneva Motor Show, the automotive world stopped. People had seen wedge-shaped prototypes before, but nothing like this. The Modulo was clean, pure geometry, futuristic to the point of looking alien. It looked like a Ferrari designed not for Earth, but for another planet.
The media swarmed it. Headlines praised Pininfarina for its boldness. Design critics awarded it not once, not twice, but 22 times internationally, including the coveted Award for Design Excellence in 1971. For a concept car, that was an extraordinary reception. Even those who criticized its practicality couldn't ignore its impact. And practicality was a problem. The Modulo was incredibly hard to get in and out of. You had to slide the entire glass canopy forward and climb in like an astronaut boarding a capsule. Visibility was terrible. The covered wheels limited steering angles. And at the time, the car wasn't even fully drivable. It was designed as a showpiece, not a road car. For many, that was the contradiction. Ferrari had given it the heart of a Le Mans racer, but clothed it in a body that made actual driving almost impossible. Still, for the audience of 1970, those flaws didn't matter. What mattered was the message. Ferrari and Pininfarina weren't afraid to imagine a future beyond curves and tradition. They wanted to lead the conversation, to show that design could be daring, that cars could be sculpture. And while the Modulo never entered production, in fact, only one single unit was ever built, its presence alone elevated Ferrari's reputation. This wasn't a failure. It was a success in its mission, capturing imaginations, winning awards, and carving its place in automotive history. To put it simply, the reception was electric. People didn't just see the Modulo, they remembered it. It became one of those rare concept cars that lived far beyond the auto show floor. And half a century later, it still makes jaws drop, proof that when design and performance collide, legends are born. Half a century has passed since the Ferrari 512S Modulo stunned the world in Geneva. Yet today, it still feels like a car from another dimension. Its legacy is not measured by how many units were sold, because only one exists, but by the impact it left on automotive history, design culture, and the imagination of enthusiasts worldwide. For decades, the Modulo remained in Pininfarina's private collection. It traveled the globe as a showpiece, admired in museums and exhibitions, quietly gathering myths around itself. Unlike production Ferraris, it didn't rack up racing victories or sales figures. Instead, it racked up stories, awards, and admirers. Designers studied its wedge profile. Enthusiasts debated its practicality. Magazines called it a dream car. It wasn't just a Ferrari anymore. It was an icon of design. But the story didn't end in the past. In 2014, the Modulo was sold to collector and filmmaker James Glickenhaus, a man known for breathing life into rare Ferraris. For him, the Modulo wasn't just something to display under spotlights, it deserved to run, to roar, to live. So he embarked on an ambitious restoration, turning a static showpiece into a functional Ferrari once again. Imagine the challenge, reviving a concept car that was never meant to be driven. The V12 engine had to be rebuilt, the exhaust and cooling systems redesigned for real-world use. The fragile canopy entry needed reinforcement. Even the steering had to be adjusted for safe maneuverability. At one point during testing, an exhaust issue caused a small fire that scorched its tail. But even that incident became part of the Modulo's legend, proof that this spaceship of a car was alive, dangerous, and real. Today, the Modulo isn't just a museum artifact. It has been seen on roads, at events like Villa d'Este, and in videos where its V12 screams to life. To watch it move under its own power is surreal, like a piece of science fiction coming off the page and into reality. For many enthusiasts, seeing the Modulo drive for the first time was almost emotional, as if a childhood dream had suddenly materialized in front of them. Now, let's talk value. How much is the Ferrari Modulo worth? That's a nearly impossible question to answer. Being a one-off concept, it has no market comparables. But experts estimate that if it ever went to auction, it could command tens of millions of dollars. Not just because it's a Ferrari, but because it's a Ferrari unlike any other, a bridge between art and engineering. Its value is not in horsepower or lap times, but in uniqueness and cultural weight. For collectors, it's the ultimate holy grail. You can buy a 250 GTO if you have $70 million. You can find a 288 GTO, an F40, or even a LaFerrari. But you cannot simply go shopping for a Modulo. There is only one, and it will likely stay in the hands of Glickenhaus or pass between ultra-private collectors. It's the kind of car people insure like artwork, showcase like a painting, but still dream about driving on a lonely road at sunset. And the curiosities around the Modulo only add to its mystique. Those 24 circular vents on the engine cover? They're not just styling gimmicks, they let you peek directly into the Ferrari V12, almost like looking into the heart of a beast. The Canopy entry system? It makes you feel more like a test pilot boarding a spacecraft than a driver stepping into a car. And its low profile, just 93 centimeters tall, means you could practically look over it while standing next to it. Even today, people are shocked by how impossibly low and wide it really is in person. Another fascinating element of its legacy is how it influenced the future. The wedge profile championed by Paolo Martin and embodied in the Modulo became a design language of the 1970s and 1980s. Supercars like the Lotus Esprit, Lamborghini Countach, and countless concept cars carried the DNA of this design. The Modulo didn't just break rules, it wrote new ones. So how is it viewed today by car enthusiasts? With awe, with respect, and with a little disbelief. It represents an era when designers weren't afraid to dream big, when car companies were willing to fund outrageous experiments, when engineering and imagination collided. For Ferrari fans, it shows another side of the brand, not just racing heritage or road-going supercars, but pure, fearless creativity. And perhaps that's the Modulo's greatest legacy. It proves that a car doesn't need to be mass-produced to be legendary. Sometimes one single example is enough to inspire generations. The Ferrari 512 S Modulo is proof that a car doesn't have to be produced in numbers to change history. One single masterpiece was enough to make the name Pininfarina and Ferrari Modulo echo through decades as one of the boldest concept cars ever built. If you're as passionate about classic cars and vintage supercars as I am, then this journey doesn't stop here. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you never miss a story like this, and give this video a thumbs up if the Modulo blew your mind as much as it did mine. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What fascinates you the most about the Ferrari 512 S Modulo? And tell me, which legendary classic car or rare concept car would you love to see me cover next on the channel? And don't forget to share this video with a fellow car enthusiast who lives for stories about Ferrari one-off prototypes and the kind of cars that remind us why we fell in love with this world in the first place. Because here, it's not just about cars. It's about passion, history, and keeping the spirit of legends alive.